moving on now to number 4, when we combine a restoration of the rule of law and rebuild American jobs, you can see that immediately those two combine together into number 4, quality of life for every American. So it's a natural flow there. However, I want to add that out of all of these areas, this is one of the strongest for me when I look back at candidate Trump's promises as opposed to President Trump's promises kept. I feel that during the 4 years of his administration, our quality of life across the nation arose. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, and to hear as well how you see that working out in Idaho under your administration.
So I agree. I believe that the quality of life increased during President Trump's time as president in the Oval Office. And why did that increase? Mostly, well, it was twofold. People felt confident in being able to, create, invent, start businesses and to develop their businesses, expand their businesses. And why? Because they felt that there was somebody in Washington, D.C., in control of Washington, D.C., that was not going to try to take their wealth, but that was just going to allow them to create it. So there was that aspect of it. And I want to tell you a story. It might just take me a little bit to tell this story because it's a true story, and I think it really applies to this. And the message behind it, at least for me, was amazing. So you may or may not know. I mean, I know you know, but your listeners or people watching this may not know that I spent 2 years in federal prison. I was never convicted of a crime, not even a misdemeanor, but I spent 2 years in federal prison. Half that time was in solitary confinement. Right along with my brothers and my father and many other people, we were unjustly held in those prisons. Again, never committed any crime, never was convicted of any, not even a misdemeanor. So, but during that time, I learned a lot. In fact, my brothers and I tease that we went to college for 2 years because it was such an education. Yeah, it was such an education. Well, one time when I was not in solitary confinement, I was in maximum security, and I actually went outside. It was a little cold, but I needed fresh air. I hadn't seen the sun or the, fresh air. So I went outside, and there's just like a little cage, almost like a chicken cage, that's outside, like chicken run. And I'm out there. No one else is out there except one other individual. And he's this big black dude. And he's just, I could tell he was reserved, and I knew he was respected in the prison. And it was just him and I'm just sitting on the ground reading, and he's over there actually doing pull-ups like they're nothing, Sure. And he stops doing pull-ups, and he comes over and he says, "Mr. Bundy," because everybody in there called me Mr. Bundy. I don't really know why, but they have all their alias names, So they called me Mr. Bundy, and he says, "I have a question for you." And I could tell it was a serious, sincere question that he wanted to ask. And he said, ultimately, to the sense, he goes, "I'm getting out of here soon." And he says, "I'm a felon, and I don't think I could live as a felon in this country. So I'm going to leave." And he goes, "I'm going to go to Africa." And he says, "My question is what do you think I could do for the African people? I want to do some good." He goes, "What do you think I could do for them?" And I thought, that's such a strange question, right? Like, he then he rephrased it. He goes, "What do you think that they need?" Well, part of the reason why it was so interesting to me is because just prior to that, I was helping another guy. He was another black guy, and he had spent a lot of time in Africa. He was a United States citizen, but he spent a lot of time in Africa. And he was showing me some of his discovery of the places that he stayed. And it was just amazing. There was these huge amounts of communities all over, and they were living in mud huts or these places that were, built by garbage. And And it
Sure.
was, and I got to see that. He was showing me some video in the law library of how these kids were, why it was part of his discovery. I have no idea, but why they would go and take these jugs and they would walk 8 miles each day to fill up their waters, to go to a stream or whatever, 8 miles,
Incredible.
just so that they can have running water. And so this was like, a month or so prior to me being asked this question. Well, I began to talk with this individual who spent a lot of time in Africa and be able to kind of think about the people of Africa and why they would be living in these mud huts and so forth. And I came to the conclusion that the reason why they were living in these mud huts, and I believe I'm absolutely accurate, and I've had many people after telling the story say, Mr. Bundy or Ammon, you are right in your determination and your conclusion of why these people are living in mud huts and why they don't build infrastructure and why they don't dig wells and why they don't do all these things. Why don't they put a floor? They're living on dirt in their mud huts. Why don't they put a floor in? Why don't they put even doors? They're just hanging garbage for their doors. Why don't they do this type of stuff? And my determination is because, not because they were lazy. As you know, hauling water 8 miles on your back with a stick is not easy. It's not because they're lazy. Digging through the garbages and grabbing things and trying to build just enough to keep themselves covered is not lazy. It's not because they're lazy. It's absolutely not. Even though most people want to believe that it's because that, it is absolutely not because they're lazy.
No
it's
way.
Because, Pasquale, it's because that every time they get something of value, it's taken from them.
That's brilliant, Hammond.
It's because every time, so they don't build anything worth anything because they can't keep it. If you and I both know that the American people would be more than willing to send them pumps and wells and even pay for their drills.
Of course
we would send them tractors to have agriculture and develop their farms. But every time they have something of value, it's taken from them. If they had a tractor, then the government or the warlords would take it from them. If they have a pump, they take it from them. If they build a nice house, they take it from them.
Absolutely.
Even if they have a beautiful family, they still take their daughters and their sons and force their sons to be soldiers and their daughters to do worse things. And so they don't have anything of value because that's the safest place for them to live. So that's why they live in mud huts. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're unintelligent. It's because they don't have the defense to protect themselves against those who take. And so I told that man, because I could tell he was a skilled man, he had a leadership ability, and he had probably run gangs and all of that, right? Which I know is a weird kind of oxymoron to my whole story.
No,
but
true.
I said, go and defend those people, build a defense up for those people. That's all they need. Because as soon as they're defended, right? As soon as their property and their rights are defended, guess what? All of a sudden, now they know they can farm and they can keep the fruits of their labor. They know they can build their houses and they can keep them. They could develop their families. They could put their investment into their young children and into their sons and their daughters, and know that the next generation is going to be able to, have even a better life than them. They know all these things, and it all comes down to one thing: to defense of their rights. And that's why what's happening in this country is we're losing that, and we're being diminished to mud huts. I know that seems like a long ways out, and maybe it is a long ways out, but that's what is happening. Why? Because we're losing our defense. We're losing our ability to keep what we work for. And so when it comes to, this number 4, the quality of life for every American, one thing keeps the quality of life for every American or every Idahoan, and that is to defend their rights so that they can keep their life and their liberty and their property. And then the quality of life increases for every person. And that's all anybody needs in this world, is just defense against the wicked people, the wicked men and women who will take what does not belong to them. And so,
no, go ahead.
go ahead. I've pretty much wrapped up what I want.
Okay. Thank you, Ammon. I'm going to give it back. Rule of law. Without the rule of law, without the ability to feel that your things will be protected from the illegal usurpation by some other force, theft by somebody in power or somebody in the dark of night, without that, your job is of no value to you. If you can't keep the rewards of your earnings without the rule of law, the job doesn't move you forward. And without the rule of law to protect what you build, and without jobs or businesses to grow your wealth, there isn't quality of life. But even if you've got the job without the rule of law, you can't have quality of life. So even though, and I know this from the time I spent, as you may recall, I've shared before, living in Mexico. There are many people that live behind these walls and the barbed wire on top that do have security guards that are, experts in martial arts and very good with their weapons, etc., that are there to protect them, and they build wealth, but it's not able to grow. It's not able to spread out. And they can't pass forward like a Bill Gates when he's building Microsoft. He made more millionaires than had ever existed before. That doesn't happen in Mexico because the quality of life is limited by the lack of rule of law.
Yeah, and there's no more power greater than the government power typically.
Yes.
That's not always the case, but typically. And so if that power is not, dedicating its time to securing the life, liberty, and property of the people, then that all deteriorates. And then if that power becomes the one who is taking life, liberty, and property, or restricting the people from using their life, their liberty, and their property, then it's just the quality of life for everybody is diminished. And so, it goes right into the next line, where healing our cities. It's all connected together.
Absolutely. Let's just go ahead and do that right now. Go ahead.
Well, we have